In this video, I'm setting up a brand new macroalgae tank for these two guys. After moving house and letting the old tank slide a little more than I'd like to admit, it's time for a serious upgrade. The new tank measures 60 by 40 by 40 centimeters and holds just under 100 liters of water. It's also the smaller counterpart to a big new peninsula project, which you'll be seeing a lot more of in future videos. Just like the old setup, I'm keeping things simple, and you'll find the full list of the equipment that I'm using down in the description. I've already got the light mounted and the wave maker installed, so it's time to get some sand in here. I'm using a 10 kilo box of 0.5 to 1.5 millimeter biosand, and unfortunately the box arrived with a hole in it, which means I've already got sand scattered all over the place before I've even started. The original plan was to use half of it and save the rest for another project, but for now it's all going in here, and I'll worry about removing the excess later. My favourite part of any build is always the hardscape. It's the part that really sets the character of the tank, and just like in my previous macroalgae tank and my main reef tank, I'm using ARKA My Reef rocks, and a 20 kilo box like this goes surprisingly far. However, this time I've gone with medium-sized rocks rather than the large ones. In my experience, it's much easier to build a larger structure by combining smaller rocks than it is to break up the bigger rocks using a hammer. It's also way less messy. Plus, this isn't a huge tank, so the scale should work out nicely with these sized rocks. I spend a while testing different layouts outside of the tank, but nothing really clicks. So eventually I move everything into the tank and start building the hardscape where it is actually going to live. Some people like to place the rocks directly on the glass to make sure nothing shifts when animals inevitably start digging underneath them, and that's definitely good practice. That said, if you're only running a relatively shallow sand bed, you can put the sand down first and gently work the rocks down until they touch the bottom of the glass anyway. That way you'll still get the stability without having to pour the sand in around the hardscape later. It also makes you feel safer if you're going to drop a rock by accident. One thing that I always try to include is plenty of caves and swim-throughs. Most saltwater fish make good use of them, and there's something really satisfying about seeing fish weaving through the rockwork all day long. This is what I've come up with so far, but before I go any higher, I want to lock everything into place, and just like you would in freshwater aquascaping, the toilet paper or cotton and superglue method works brilliantly. Just stuff a little bit of cotton into the connection points, soak it with glue, then cover any of the glue spots with some sand. Once it dries, it joins together really well, and you can't even tell it's been glued. With the hardscape sorted, I break up some of the smaller reef rocks and load them into the filter. I ended up having to get the hammer out after all. I've used this approach quite a few times now, and it works really well as additional biological media. For filtration, I'm running an Oase Biomaster 250 thermo. The built-in heater keeps extra equipment out of the display, and the removable pre-filter makes maintenance super easy. With everything else ready to go, it's time to mix some salt water, and every saltwater mix comes with its own set of instructions on the back of the bucket or the bag that you bought it in. I run all of my tanks at 35 ppt, so that's what I'm going to be aiming for here as well. Once I've measured out the salt, I mix it into RODI water and give it plenty of time to dissolve. Salt water can quite often look like it's mixed together before it actually really is, so I normally make mine in 20 litre batches and leave it circulating for about 24 hours before using it. While the salt water is mixing, I can get the filter connected. The Biomaster uses 16 by 22 hose fittings, but these lily pipes that I have are designed for 12 by 16 tubing, so I need to install an adapter before everything is going to fit together correctly. The next morning, the salt water is fully mixed and reading at 35 ppt on the fractometer, so it's finally time to fill the tank. Once it's full, I fire up the filter, get some flow moving, and add the 2 bottles of bacteria that came with the sand. I also make a few adjustments to the lily pipe intake to get the surface skimmer working properly. Since I'm doing a fish-in cycle, it's time to start transferring life across from the old setup. I begin with the snails and a few loose coral frags that are easy to remove. I'm also selecting some of the more interesting pieces of live rock from the old tank and incorporating them into the new hardscape. Not only do these add a bit more height and detail, but they're also absolutely packed with beneficial bacteria and tiny microorganisms. This tank is crawling with micro brittle stars, so I'd like as many of those guys to come across as possible. Of course, moving rock from an existing system also means moving any pests that happen to be living on it. Bubble algae, flatworms, whatever's already in there is coming along for the ride. Personally, I'm not too concerned about that. Most of the things occur naturally anyway, and in future videos we'll be looking at natural ways to keep these things under control. Most of the macroalgae I currently have is Caulerpa prolifera, although there are also a few pieces of flame algae and dragon's breath mixed in. Unfortunately, I lost some of my more interesting species over time, after the dove snails decided they were on the menu. I'm also taking this opportunity to move a few of these soft corals from my main reef tank, which is starting to get a little bit overcrowded. Now that we've added a bunch of life that's actively producing waste, it's time to kickstart the cycle properly. For that, I'm using Special Blend from ARKA, and for a tank this size I need to add 25 mils. Special Blend introduces live bacteria strains that help establish the nitrogen cycle, making it one of the most important steps in the entire fish-in cycle process. The next stage can't happen for another 3 or 4 hours, so while waiting, I can start catching the fish. Blended, Servo, and Ribbon are finally getting their upgrade. Sadly, the camel shrimp that originally inspired the first tank passed away a few months ago. My best guess is it's probably from old age. They don't tend to live particularly long, and it was probably already fairly old when I got it. They seem to sit in shops for a long time because they aren't exactly coral safe, which is a shame because they're really beautiful, but they do have a habit of picking at corals. The fish should be pretty happy in here. The new home is more than twice the size of the old one, so it gives them a lot more room to explore, and it has a lot more caves. As always, Servo takes his sweet time deciding on whether he wants to cooperate, just like he did last time. One thing that's also really important to mention is tank covers. Reef fish are notorious jumpers, and sooner or later they'll find a gap and get dried up on the floor. A mesh lid is usually the best option, although glass and acrylic covers work too. Just make sure there's still enough airflow to prevent CO2 from building up. 4 hours later, it's time for the second part of the cycling process. Now I can add ARKA Nite-Out 2. For this tank I need 10 mils initially, followed by 10 mils every day for the next week. There's a really good, easy to follow chart on the website that makes it pretty much foolproof. The goal here is to feed and support the bacteria colonies introduced earlier, so they can begin reproducing and colonizing the system. And finally, we have this little guy. He's one of the descendants of Carnage, my giant bubble tip anemone, and he's about to become the stress test for this entire setup. Anemones are notoriously sensitive to unstable conditions and are usually something you'd wait 6 months or more before introducing to a tank. So if he settles in and stays happy, that'll be a pretty good sign that this fish-in cycle is doing exactly what it's supposed to. See you in a week. While a week isn't exactly a long period of time in the grand scheme of things, stability in a saltwater aquarium is something that's achieved on a scale of months and even years rather than days or weeks. That said, it does still give you a useful glimpse into how things are tracking. Corals, fish and inverts are usually pretty quick to show signs of stress, and so far, as expected, things are going very well. The macroalgae has already started showing signs of growth, and the corals have settled in nicely, with great polyp extension across the board. Servo, Blended and Ribbon are all very active and have quickly found their preferred spots in the tank as well, which is a great sign in a new system. Even Carnage 5.0 is doing really well, and he's moved a couple of times and found a spot he seems to prefer a lot more than where I originally placed him. If an anemone isn't happy where it is, it'll simply pack up and move until it finds somewhere better. So far the thing that surprised me the most though is the water clarity. It's absolutely insane. I honestly wasn't expecting it to look this clean this early into the cycle, especially with how much life has already been transferred over. As for ARKA Complete and All-In-One, they aren't needed just yet, but they will come into play as the tank becomes more established. With regular water testing, I'll start adding them into the autodoser so the corals and macroalgae have all the trace elements they need for steady, long-term growth. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do, because this is only the start of the journey. There's still plenty more to do here, and I've already started working on the big new peninsula project as well. And if this is your first time here, go back and check out season 1 and 2 of my Shallow Reef series.